Welcome to the Juicebox podcast. My name is Matthew.
And I'm Brileigh.
And in this series of conversations, we'll be sitting down with the builders and community members of the Juicebox ecosystem.
Today, we'll be talking with Sean from JokeDAO.
JokeDAO is a bottom-up, on-chain governance dApp for communities to create contests, submit entries, and vote on their favorites. It can be used by communities to vote on grants, bounties, curation, contests, and more. As a proof of concept for the JokeDAO platform, the Jokerace is a weekly contest where the community-submitted joke with the second highest number of votes wins and is minted as an NFT.
In this episode, two proof-of-work blockchains walk into a bar and the bartender says, "A bunch of your friends just tried to get in here, but we had to kick them out. They're minors." All right, just kidding. In this episode, we discuss the current pitfalls of one token, one vote governance and how JokeDAO's governance as entertainment model is making this process fun while creating a social graph for community participation. We also learn about the bicameral governance structure behind JokeDAO and the Jokerace, and how Sean discovered crypto and other projects they're building, like the Towers 3.
We hope you enjoy this week's episode.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Sean. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. How about y'all?
Pretty good. It's really great to have you with us today. I've always associated your name with the Crypto Coven PFP, and I've only had wonderful encounters with folks from the Coven community, so always nice to get to talk with another Coven.
Heck yeah, that's awesome.
I'm also really excited for my mom to listen to this episode because for years, she has sent me emails, and all of them have the subject line, "Howdy," all caps. And inside each email is just a joke. So before we get into this, I'd love to read you some of the jokes that she sends me, if that's all right.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So the first one, "They dared me to jump off a cliff, but it was just a bluff.
Okay, nice.
I got fired from my job as a taxi driver. It turns out my customers didn't like it when I tried to go the extra mile."
That's good.
And the last one I have is, "What do you call a neighborhood where several authors live? A writer's block."
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right, well, let's start with the infamous question that everyone loves to ask, which is, how did you get involved with crypto?
With crypto generally.
Yeah, bring us back to the Sean origin story. How did you get involved with the space? What brought you here? Or maybe what were you working on before you got involved with crypto?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated college in May 2020. So in 2016, I was in my senior year of high school. And I learned about this Bitcoin thing, and I thought it was super cool. And I remember, like, every day after school, I'd like go and check CoinDesk for like the price of Bitcoin, bought a little bit, and basically just like learned about what it was. Thought it was really cool, and I've always been interested in finance as well as computers, so it was just a really cool intersection. I didn't get super into it, not even really into like communities and stuff. Didn't get chronically online until like the pandemic in 2020. But yeah, just got like super interested, like invested and stuff through the bull market of 2017 and then consequently the bear market of 2018, 2019. I thought the tech was really cool. We got really interested in projects, but primarily only invested, didn't contribute much. And then you come to 2020 and like things are starting to get hot again. Really what I got back into it with was the DeFi summer and like all of the different yield farming schemes, especially with Yearn. I just got super interested. I remember spending 2 weeks just absolutely nose deep in white papers and learning everything I could about DeFi.
Nice.
And then from there, got super interested, started learning, started getting on Twitter more, got into like Alchemix in like early 2021 and like really into their community and product, which I still am a huge chiller of. And then I actually got involved with Juicebox and like got in touch with the Juicebox team in the fall of 2021. So that's kind of like up until now. Like I got involved in some other DAOs, especially Web3 Baddies and Crypto Culture and Society for a little bit there in late 2021. Up until now, like early 2022, I was doing stuff with Web3 Baddies. And then that's also when JokeDAO started getting up and running. And David created it with a couple other people and started doing joke races. And I got involved with that. And so that's how I originally got involved with JokeDAO.
Gotcha. Okay. And you mentioned in a Web3 Galaxy Brain episode hosted by our friend Nicholas that JokeDAO is trying to make governance fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that one of the ways that JokeDAO does this is by acknowledging collusion as being inherent to governance and encouraging people to work together to game the system in order to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some recent experiences with collusion in DAOs. One in particular that comes to mind is Coordinate and how the system is used to determine compensation. Basically, you vote for other DAO members based on how much you think they contributed in a given month. After a month or two, we noticed certain patterns, and we started putting together this huge Figma file of transactions and wallet addresses to figure out what exactly was going on. Long story short, several members were actually one or two people, hard to say exactly, and they were all paying each other through the Coordinate system, and they managed to extract between 0.2 to 0.5 ETH every month through this racket. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the pitfalls of DAO governance as it exists today? We just have this gut feeling that you must have some hot takes on governance.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think that especially given what crypto originally, the easiest use case that it came to, which is payments, right? That's what people's minds originally are on. And then also just capital will get allocated more quickly to things that are easily financialized. So that's why I think DeFi blew up. A lot of the first use cases of crypto were very technical things.
Right.
How can we make financial products and things like that, right? And so how quants think about things, quantitative financial traders and things like that, is just trying to systemize everything and making everything into a variable, everything into a system. And I think what we're moving into is we're starting to see more human level, layer zero interactions and what communities are trying to do. So I think what a pitfall that I've seen a lot so far is trying to incentivize or systemize one's way or a community's way out of being human or having relationships matter. What I believe is a revolutionary or more helpful way to view communities or ways of getting things done is grounding it in the relationships that people have. So I think the biggest pitfall is the trustlessness of the system people have tried to import into communities, and I don't think that works. So to the point of collusion, I think what we try to do with saying that collusion is encouraged is that we're trying to recognize that really we're just people. We're all just a bunch of people doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are doing things, we're going to communicate with each other. So why don't we just recognize that as a fact to start and not try to mitigate bad actors or anything, but starting from the fact of we are humans, right? Either we start and we recognize that and we say, okay, we're just going to recognize that humans are going to do things. And then let's just have things work in the best way that we can given that. Or we can start from, well, we're going to set the premise of we're all in good faith with each other and we're having good relationships. And then we build up from there. But I think recognizing whichever those routes you go, recognizing that we're humans and you're not going to be able to fully systematize something because we're not all on chain, and relationships matter is a recognition I think that's really important and that we tried to make.
One of the things that was brought up in a lot of the articles that we read was that a lot of the governance models that we see in DAOs right now are skeuomorphic versions of existing governance models, whether that be in politics or otherwise, and that in a way we're at least up until this point, still building up a very equivalent system of governance, more or less representative democracy, the one token, one vote approach to this. So it feels like maybe we're repeating many of these same mistakes and coming to a lot of the same conclusions because we are building up something very similar to what already exists. And we actually need to work in a way that is internet native and takes advantage of the things that are uniquely possible within this context as opposed to a traditional governance context.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we have new tools for sure, and that will enable us to do that. One big thing that I often feel like a broken record on, but I don't even know if we'll be able to design our way out of a lot. I don't necessarily think that a lot of these things are mistakes. I think they are responses of people and systems to the material constraints that they're in. How material capital is allocated matters a lot, I think. No design is going to be able to out-design the fact that billionaires exist and that billionaires ultimately are the ones who decide where money gets put. So I think that's something that I constantly am we have cool tools and stuff. And with JokeDAO too, I've tried to be JokeDAO isn't going to fix a system that already only cares about what rich people want, right? Like rich people are still just going to dominate and build that system. But it can be a new tool by which people, anyone, regardless of how much material goods they have, can coordinate with each other. So like the bottom up aspect is what we're trying to enable a lot too.
So we've talked a little bit about some of the shortcomings of current DAO governance models, but on the other side of that, are there any models, examples of DAO governance that you feel are working really well, working more as intended, that are meaningfully decentralized? Like it feels like a lot of DAOs that are being built, at least right now, are more interested in the trendiness of the term DAO than actually figuring out how to govern effectively. And the kind of allure of the DAO label feels maybe more important. And, there is an important social component here, but there's also actually trying to figure out how to govern effectively. So are there any DAOs that come to mind for you that you feel are models that we should look to? Or were there any that really inspired you to help build JokeDAO as it is now?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say my favorite model is the consensus-based governance because it is rooted in like layer zero. Like I think the most important thing is that people have good relationships when it comes to governance. And it's like, it's not systematized. It's just like the best governance I've been a part of, which was Web3 baddies for a while there, was grounded in the fact that we were going to treat each other well and we had community guidelines. And then we moved together in a way that like prioritized consent, because that's what like consensus-based governance is all about. It's not about getting everyone to be fully gung-ho and 100% on an answer, but it's about getting everyone to move together and at least be like, okay, I'm cool with this. And like, I trust each other. So that's like hands down the best way that I like to move with people and have communities move and make decisions together. When like material constraints or like money is introduced into the mix, Juicebox was a massive inspiration for JokeDAO, right? Looking at it and being like, okay, if we do have things that can really be life-changing and like that have material impacts and like have to do with people's livelihoods, what's a good way to manage this? What I've seen and what I'm always a proponent of is being worker owned and worker operated and worker controlled and centering the people doing the work and having those people have the biggest say and having a community have input on that and like really caring about the community, but like having contributor focused governance. Not that the contributors are the only ones that make the decisions, but they are who get paid for their labor and have a heavy impact on what is done. Because here's the thing too, in the end, if the developers that are permissioned on the GitHub or control the deployment of a website, that is where the power is in the first place. So I think just like contributor-centric governance just mirrors the reality of the situation a lot better. And then you can ground yourself in relationships and be like, well, are they actually acting in good faith? And then decide if you want to be a part of the community or not, or like what you want to push for in a community.
So JokeDAO is building a new approach to governance that is bottom up and on-chain. Can you describe what you're building with JokeDAO and the team's vision for how governance should work? Maybe we can start with describing the Jokerace as a proof of concept and go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So with regards to what our vision is, I think that's good to start with, and then going into like what we've built and then the implementation of that. The vision is like for things to be much more about social cohesion than about a right answer. What David and I always talked about, and like a good way of explaining what we care about, what we optimize for, is like maybe you get the top 90th percentile decision instead of the top 99th percentile, but you get people excited about making decisions together. And in the process of making a decision, people are talking to each other and they get a big say in the options that people are voting on. And like they're just more engaged. That's what we tend to optimize for in JokeDAO. So that's the vision of what we'd love to see governance more turn into. Less just like, oh shoot, I have to log on and vote on these proposals. And it's like it's a task, right? And you don't even get much say in what the options you're voting on are. And let's be honest, the whales and like the people proposing the proposals usually drive what option wins. But for it more to be like a conversation and engagement and like not even debate in an adversarial way, but just like that the community is engaged in the decisions being made. And a good metric you can use to tell whether that is being done is how excited people are to be part of a community, how much they're cohering and getting to know each other and becoming friends. So that's what we'd love to see governance be more centered on going forward in the vision. So what we built is bottom-up governance, which just means that anyone can create contests, is what we call them, but basically decisions to be voted on. You can put up a poll, or you can put up a question and it's on chain, and you can say who can propose options to answer that question, and then you can say who can vote on those options that are proposed. And it's bottom up in that, like, the default we set is make it so that anyone can propose an option. So for example, who should we give a grant to? Have anyone in your community or anyone outside of your community propose who should get a grant, or who should be the guest speaker at our event. Have people be able to propose those things, and then have that same community that's proposing it be able to vote on it too. So like, really from the ground up, the top down would be saying, all right, here are your options, you have to choose, and having someone say, here are your options, you have to choose. Bottom up being the community's deciding everything from the options to what the actual outcome is. And so like, we've seen that this model really helps and like encourages social cohesion, because with the Jokerace, the implementation of what we've built, we've seen, to describe the Jokerace real quick, is that it is basically a contest every week we put on that say to anyone, hey, propose a joke. And if it is, at least what the Jokerace began as, if it is the second highest voted joke, then that is the winner, right? So it's fun. People are proposing jokes. And then you also have some game theory that people have to collude around and cohere on to strategize with to try to get the second most joke,
Right.
The second most voted joke, right? So it makes it so that you kind of have to work with people to get the outcome that you'd like. And we've seen some really awesome social cohesion and collusion come out of that. I'm part of the Joke Cartel, which is just a group of people that were playing the Jokerace from pretty early to even recently that they started. And then we work together to like get the joke we want to win. And it's really fun, and people have gotten to know each other through it. So that's been the implementation we found and what we've built that really helps people come together and have cohesion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, earlier, Brileigh brought up the collusion that we discovered in JokeDAO. And I just remember at the time, we spent so much energy worrying about this. And governance felt like such a boring thing that we, like a chore, basically, that we had to attend to. And it just was the complete opposite of what you're describing, which is it's fun, but at the same time, it's complex because there is this game theory element to it that you described. The winning joke is not the first, with the most votes, it's the second. And this can also change in the future based on what the NFT holders decide. But it feels like you're building a platform that has been, thought about deeply in terms of addressing fundamental issues in governance. And we've been going through the Jokenomics article that was published on Mir, which is great. And specifically the section about bicameral checks and balances that references governance in the Roman Republic, with the Comitia, which were sort of different interest groups from various classes, and then the Senate, which was more powerful and kind of elite group. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about this two-part system that you've developed for the governance of JokeDAO and the Jokerace, and why it was designed this way. It reminds us a little bit of the two houses approach that Optimism took with the token house and the citizens house. So I'm wondering if you could maybe describe that a little bit and tell us about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll be honest and first give credit where credit's due. This is definitely David's brainchild and is a really cool and new way to think about governance, instead of it just being like straight up one metric to decide what happens.
Right.
But I think ultimately, like, the biggest thing that I find compelling about it and splitting up powers is that it makes things more into a game. Not in a game as in trivializing it, but in a game that it is more reflective of reality, that there are groups that have different interests, and those groups have different interests in different things. Because with JokeDAO, we have questions like, what are the parameters of the next Jokerace going to be? And how should we go about allocating voting power, which that is tied to the joke token. But it's like, what are ways that we can like change this game and like make it cool and like edit it? And then you also have questions about the DAO itself. What are myself and Naomi and David working on? And like, what features do we want to prioritize? So like, these are examples of questions that all have to do with kind of the same thing, this JokeDAO entity, but people have different interests, levels of interest in the different questions that are being asked. So I don't think any system's going to be perfect or even like comprehensive, but I think it's cool in that it's like an experiment in how things can be split up. We see the different houses of representing, like, historically, of different interests, especially now that we have better and better tools that make it easier and like lower the barriers to communication and decision making. We can start to like play around with like a lot more diverse and varied ways of splitting up power and deciding who makes which decisions and how much someone should be able to have influence over certain decisions. What I really liked about the article was that it pitched it very much in like, this is not the system that is the end all be all. This is what the NFTs mean, and this is what the token means. But like, ultimately, these are people making these decisions. And what we're building the system around is not trying to control the people, but trying to empower the people and like have the people that are engaged in JokeDAO and the game we play and the things we build engage in the way that most aligns with what they care about.
Totally. And I think it's also interesting that these two different sides of the governance, they can keep each other in check by vetoing one another. So the governance council can veto proposals by the joke holders and vice versa. So there's this reciprocal way for these two sides of the governance model to keep each other in check and prevent bad actors. And also in this way, it keeps both sides engaged and feeling like they have some control and meaningful interaction with the governance that's taking place.
Yeah, I'm really a fan of giving people actual meaningful buy-in, having it so that they feel actual ownership over what they're doing and what they are doing actually means something. I really like that point.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we've read that JokeDAO has been described as both a game, which is the Jokerace, and a game engine, sort of like a governance game engine. And we usually associate game theory more with DeFi or GameFi projects like StepN that kind of lean into that addictive quality of like points, leaderboards, rewards, all that kind of thing. And I think JokeDAO leans into the game element in a different way, which is more like an exercise in community, like you've described it as social cohesion. That's kind of the part that feels fun. And maybe that's the collusion or like team building aspect of it. I wonder if you could tell us more about that sort of social side of this.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way of thinking about the different ways that people use games. It's interesting because I think like the biggest difference is if you're using a game to get people to do something or if you are playing the game for its own sake. JokeDAO is much more like playing Thanksgiving dinner football, like a cultural phenomenon in America, like family after eating Thanksgiving dinner will like play football together. And it's like low stakes, but it's like people get into it and it's fun and it builds relationships. Having things that are lower stakes and are oriented around not getting something done, but in the process of doing the thing being what matters.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think, I think that's what I'd say the main delineation is between like having these points and dashboards and stuff like that. The goal is the thing itself, is the process. And I sound like some like philosopher, whatever, but I don't mean to be cheesy, but I really think that it is in the process of doing the thing. It is what matters. And that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah, totally. It's been interesting to see projects like Lens Protocol pop up and start working through the idea of social graphs as well, like what it means to build one and how it should be built. Do you see JokeDAO as kind of an on-chain social network? It feels equal parts social experiment and governance experiment in that way.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really fun because like it brings a lot of people together to play games like the Joke Cartel I mentioned. I likely would not have met a lot of those people, but now we meme all the time together. So like that's very casual, but like meaningful is like you really meet people through this. Like a Telegram group could be considered just a social graph, right?
Totally.
But then also like on a more meta scale, like we've had people tell us that JokeDAO was their first interface with Web3. It's similar to things like Rabbit Hole or like onboarding mechanisms can also serve as a way to look at like what is something social. The purpose of social graphs can also be to have people engage in things. So like I think JokeDAO serves multiple purposes in that, and like it's bringing people together that are already in the space, it's bringing people into the space, and then also like more functionally, more on the technical side, like how we are built is that we release a new voting token for every Jokerace. So every week we deploy a new token and we distribute it to people based on their joke token holding, right? So it's like a voting token that we distribute based on the joke token holdings on Polygon and Ethereum. And so like on a more technical level, you can track the social graph of who is engaged in JokeDAO by looking at the holdings of these different voting tokens over time. And so like that's something that we're really excited about. What if people use contests and release tokens for voting tokens on these contests, and then some really good products come out of them? Like the contests are like, hey, what feature should we build? What is the best roadmap to follow? And then the people that vote on those end up making really good decisions. Well, what if you're another project that really likes what that project did and is like, how do I get the same good judgment? Well, I can look at who was holding the tokens at the time and then airdrop them tokens to vote in my contest for products and maybe reward them for doing so. So it builds social graphs of like who's good at curation, who's good at making decisions as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. I hadn't thought of that before. And in addition to that, JokeDAO has so many possible use cases, grants, endorsements, bounties, curation, and more. And there's a lot of different mental models for thinking about how to use JokeDAO. I'm wondering if there are a few examples of joke contests that are in the wild. How has this platform been used so far?
Yeah, for sure. We actually just released a feature 2 days ago where you can now view all past contests, upcoming contests, and live contests. So I have a bit of a cheat code for this because I can now just go and look at some examples here. But I mean, the one that I'll show right now is Packy's contest that I think is still live.
Right.
Yeah, pick the not boring essay topic. So this is one that's really exciting where Packy put out a contest and just said, like, what should I write about next? So like content curation. And like we have had 140 submissions to that where people are proposing.
Wow.
It's actually interesting. Kind of a meta thing that they might write about now is just like a lot of those submissions were bots. And so like they even got ENS names and everything. It was really cool because it brought up an interesting problem, which is like, even if you say you need an ENS name to submit or anything like that, like how much do you care about bots or how do you get people to engage? That's one example, content curation. We've seen people like Wonder has used us for figuring out like what event a community should do or even the topic of a meeting. What should they talk about? Just really low stakes stuff that like gets people engaged in making decisions and make them feel like they have ownership in what they're engaging with, the community that they're a part of. The other one was, really interesting one too, was Juicebox. Juicebox in collaboration with Gildle, and I guess JokeDAO too, because they used us, our platform, they did a hackathon and said, well, all right, we'll give the community a week, build the coolest thing that you can with Scaffold ETH, which like I cannot shill Scaffold ETH enough. That is what we built version 1 of JokeDAO on. It's such an awesome tool.
Totally.
And they ran a contest on JokeDAO basically to vote on the winner of the hackathon, which got real money. There was like $10,000 up for grabs for the top 3 places of that hackathon. So people voted on the Juicebox community, like different communities got airdrop voting tokens and then came together, voted on the winning of the hackathon. It was decided with a JokeDAO contest.
Can you tell us why JokeDAO became a project on Juicebox? You mentioned having discovered JB a while ago, and most projects that we see on Juicebox start on the protocol and grow from there. And JokeDAO has been around for a while, since January, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering what led JokeDAO to Juicebox at this stage in its development.
Yeah, for sure. So JokeDAO is making it a public good, and we wanted funding from grants. We did not want to go to venture capitalists. That was what we prioritized, was aligning ourselves as best we could with building a public good that is going to be out there and anyone can use. Yeah, public good made to make governance easier and more awesome for the Web3 ecosystem. And so like Juicebox is a really great ingress point and distribution point for payroll and contributions. So we were doing payments out of multi-sig, and Juicebox just makes it super easy to have grants come in to a treasury in a very public and transparent way, show how payouts are happening and distribution of payments is happening. So it fit really well. Juicebox also made a material commitment to supporting public goods projects. And I know the project and absolutely love them. At the time we were going around and like, a lot of these grants programs, you need a lot of connections. Like it can be a pain in the butt sometimes to get material support. And Juicebox at the time was like, yeah, we'll support you. They actually came through with material support. And so it worked really well with what we needed, the payroll and ingress functions as well. So that's, I think, context for why we became a Juicebox project.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, JokeDAO is developing this really powerful, flexible tool for people to create and govern DAOs and make decisions together for any number of things. It could be grants, bounties, curation, all the things that we've discussed. The possibilities are so open-ended, but as we know from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And there's a lot of complexity that comes with flexibility. And There is something about almost like the challenge of explaining JokeDAO that feels very similar to the complexity of Juicebox. Like we often kind of, I don't want to say we struggle with this, but it's one of the things that we're kind of tasked with when getting the protocol out there is explaining it to people and coming up with strong mental models for how to explain all the different things that are possible and to sort of inspire people to use it for their thing, whatever that might be. I wonder if you've ever felt like the power of this tool and all the things that it can do makes it difficult to form mental models and explain to new users how they might use contests. Sometimes it's almost like the ability of a platform to do almost anything can make it more difficult because the burden is on the user to come up with novel use cases. I wonder if you've ever felt this way.
Oh, 100%. And I'm really grateful for my co-founder, David, who really pushed me to consider this. Like, I'm very technically minded, and I'm like, man, if I just build the best functionality, then people will use it. But we really, especially when we were thinking about, all right, like, we got a V1 up, right, which is at jokedao.jokedao.io, which very much looks like it was made by a backend engineer, myself, which just allowed people to make contests, right, and vote on contests. But when we really started thinking about, like, all right, how are we going to explain this? That was a big thing. We had like a lot of conversation around that, what it was, and like what's the best way to pitch it. But really, it came down to deciding what the product was, what we were building, and what we wanted it to do. And then figuring out, strong mental models. I resonate a lot of what you said. So we definitely ran into that issue. A lot of it was solved by discussing with ourselves and the community, like, well, what is JokeDAO? What is the Jokerace? What is the platform that we built? First, it started with definitions. And then we talked about, like, well, what's the best way to explain this to people? What do we care about communicating when we explain? And ultimately, it boiled down to bottom-up governance. And then, like, if people are grok that, fantastic. And then usually it leads to questions. Like, okay, well, what could you use it for? And then, like, having examples at the ready to bring up and say, well, this is an example of how you've seen it used. And, like, this is what it empowers. And this is describing the properties and examples of the thing. And then you get down to, like, concretely how it informed how we built our platform was a lot to do with design. How we solved it with people coming to our platform and not putting it entirely on users to decide what to do is figuring out what the best default settings were. Like, it seems mundane, but man, having to fill out 2 fields instead of 15, it makes such a big difference from getting people from 0 to 1, right? So it's things like that. We definitely ran into that issue and are still thinking about, like, as we integrate new features, what's the way to do that in the best way possible where people can understand it? Because I can say for myself, one of the biggest learnings I've had in building JokeDAO is, like, man, if people don't understand a functionality, it could be the coolest thing in the world, they will not use it. Like, if you don't understand it and have an easy way to use it, people aren't going to use it. So it's really important, I have found, and gained an appreciation for.
Yeah, totally. And on the subject of development, Juicebox DAO recently voted in favor of funding the development of JokeDAO, thanks to the proposal that you actually authored. And now that this is underway, can you share your roadmap with us and what's coming next?
Yeah, for sure. So what we just recently shipped was V2 of our website, which looks amazing with front-end dev on JokeDAO. Naomi built it. It looks dope. We just added the ability to, like, see past upcoming and live contests. And then what's coming up next on our roadmap for Juicebox actually is a couple things in our first milestone. We are going to enable downvoting, like similar to Reddit. You'll also have the ability to, as a contest creator, say whether you want downvotes or not. And then if you do, if the creator does enable downvotes, as a voter, be able to downvote, we are adding, like, a button to, like, a content moderation module where you'll be able to, like, delete proposals so that the contest creator can manage if somebody, like, posts something inappropriate, or, like, you can control what's in your contest. And then we're also looking at things like, how do we go about being able to upload media? Like, what level to which JokeDAO will be able to render and really make contests as close to a form as anybody would want. Be able to render all types of media, video, images, audio, GIFs, things like that. We already have images and GIFs, which is awesome, but just building a more robust way for people to really submit any type of content they'd like to a contest. Those are the things that we have kind of on our short-term roadmap, and is actually a summation of the first milestone we have for Juicebox, for the grant Juicebox voted in favor of for JokeDAO.
That's all really, really exciting. It's really sweet to see you being able to build out so much stuff so quickly. And we noticed that in addition to building JokeDAO, that you're also working on the Towers 3. What exactly is this initiative? Give us the juice.
Yeah. So it is myself, my friend Anne, and another friend of mine, Rachel. It's very bottom up, actually. So, like, we met each other in Web3 baddies, and then, we were looking around the Web3 space, and just a lot of the DNI programs that are out there are lacking in some regards. And we have an article on Mirror that very much and articulately explains these things. I won't ad hoc, unless I'm just reading from it, I won't be able to give it justice. But effectively, the Towers 3 is just three friends. We got together. We were like, hey, Web3 could really, I think some of our voices are lacking. We're diverse people, and we wanted to speak on these issues. And we're all interested in Web3, making Web3 a better space, a more inclusive space, and a more radically inclusive space, not just performatively so. So just writing and doing some organizing in the Web3 space to bring together marginalized folks and having mutual support, all really interested in mutual aid. But yeah, what's really cool is we formed the Towers 3, I think around the same time I was starting with JokeDAO, but it really it is a very bottom up organization. We were just we are going to start and with our relationships, the relationships as friends that we have, and we're going to build up from that and try to do some good work in this space.
Yeah, we've read the Towers 3 treaty, and we'll make sure to link it in the show notes. It's definitely one of the most altruistic and earnest articles that I think we've read on Mirror. It really feels like a lot of genuine care has gone into writing it and thinking about how to make the space better and working on this in actionable and material ways. I think zooming out a little bit, money in crypto, I mean, it's such a powerful force, and there's so many actors in the space that are interested in financial gains at the expense of everything else. And so reading a text like that feels refreshing in that sense. And we were listening to the space that you did with Nicholas about JokeDAO, and I remember you mentioned Amazon unionization early on in the space. So we kind of got this little soupçon that you were into leftist politics, at least to some extent, and some of those issues. And maybe this question comes a bit out of left field, but we were wondering if you've ever struggled with some of the media narratives surrounding crypto, which are often really reductive and focused on painting everything as a scam and all the other things. Because it's clear that you're really deeply invested in building public goods in Web3, and that you do believe in the potential for the space, even though there are things that obviously we need to change, but that there is a potential to build something better here. And it feels like we do have the possibility, at least, to make meaningful change, as cliche as that inevitably sounds. So I guess I was wondering kind of how you felt about whether these more leftist politics are compatible with crypto, or do you feel like there are fundamental tensions that you've had to work through at certain points?
Well, thanks for saying that about the Towers 3 article, and then haha, out of left field. That was funny. But yeah, I mean, I am amenable to leftist politics and consider myself a leftist for sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the high level view of what I've run into is I've definitely run into conflicts with those, and a lot of people viewing crypto very critically and not as compatible with leftist politics. And I think I 100% see where it comes from, is that myself included at points have been crypto's going to save us. This changes everything. We now can, avoid the mistakes of the past, and crypto will enable us to, save the world and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think that's what turns a lot of people off. And what I kind of had to take a step back from is now how I view it, and what makes it really compatible for me and why I'm excited about building public goods is I just view it as another tool. It's a really cool tool. We now have the ability to have a computer that's worldwide and not centrally controlled. We now have access to a tool that the rest of humanity has never had access to. And as someone who likes material analysis, which really is just saying what about the tools that humanity has access to and the resources we have access to informs how we organize and how society is structured, I think it's a tool that enables things we haven't had before. And so through that lens, it makes a lot more sense. It would be like being against the printing machine when it came out, because the people who liked the printing machine could make money with it and were really excited about it. I totally get it if people saw the printing press and were like, man, there are a lot of scam flyers being made out of this. I would totally get it. But if you look at it as just a really cool tool we haven't had before, and there's some cool things you can do with it, then I think it makes it a lot more reasonable to talk about. And for me, it made my interest in it and my wanting to work in the space a lot more compatible with what I believed was right and what I wanted to be doing with my time.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. And I had a friend with fairly strong leftist views, many that we shared. And we ended up losing our friendship over the fact that I work in crypto and NFTs. And at one point, he suggested that it was as bad as abusing animals or working for a far-right political party. And I found it profoundly ironic that so many aspects of crypto oppose banks, traditional corporate structures, hierarchies of power, and so on, which were all things that my friend hated. And I think that in part that at the time that I had that conversation, I was also still coming down from that initial wave of euphoria about learning about the space as well, of like, wow, you can do this. And like, I've now like come to the realization that, okay, it doesn't make everything better. No promise that it's going to fix things or that it will resolve anything. But at least now we have the option to try and do something different.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry that happened. That really sucks. Yeah, I've definitely run into at least criticisms of that level for sure. And I resonate with that a lot. And yeah, it's a real bummer. I don't know. I've found peace with it. I just talk about it as something that I'm excited about for sure. It is a tool that I think has vast implications. And so I think it is compatible. But yeah, a lot of the crypto industry is colored by, BitConnect or like, things like that. To the original question, I have definitely found, at least like what I'm working on, I feel very strongly like it is aligned with what I believe. And like the material circumstances that I'm working in, the fact that capital is allocated the way that it is, the material conditions we're in aren't great. What I'm working on, I think, could be good. I don't know. It's hard to square, but I think through that lens, I generally am like, okay, this makes sense. A lot of the people I know that are in leftist spaces at least have been amenable to that. And then when it gets to the environmental argument, it's like, okay, just wait for proof of stake. Like, just please wait till proof of stake.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, if listeners want to participate in the Jokerace or make their own contest, where should they go? How should they get started?
For sure. JokeDAO.io. That is where you can find everything you need. We have links to our GitHub, which is where our code is hosted, our OpenSea, where like Jokerace NFTs are. On that page, you can view all past, present, and upcoming contests. So you can get a feel for what Jokeraces are like or what people have used JokeDAO for before. And you also have the ability to create a contest. And we have a really cool prompt for that. Speaking to what we did earlier is like makes it really straightforward to make a voting token, distribute it to who you want, make a contest, and get voting and proposing on stuff. So JokeDAO.io is the place to go. And then following JokeDAO _ on Twitter is where you can follow along with what we're doing.
And where can listeners follow you on Twitter as well?
Yeah, for sure. It is Sean, SEANMC _ ETH. And that is my handle. It is also my ENS name.
All right. Thank you so much, Sean, for taking the time to sit down with us and discuss JokeDAO. We've really enjoyed going down this rabbit hole together.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. This has been great.
All right. Thanks again, Sean.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Juicebox podcast. You can find us online at juicebox.money and on Twitter at juiceboxeth. Join the conversation at discord.gg/juicebox.
The Juicebox podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Views expressed by guests and the hosts do not reflect the views of Juicebox DAO or the Juicebox podcast. The Juicebox podcast is not investment advice or a solicitation to make any financial decisions. Projects on the Juicebox protocol are not vetted by Juicebox DAO.
Each project on the Juicebox protocol is responsible for its own crowdfunding parameters. The tokenomics of one project may differ from other projects on the protocol. Do not purchase JBX tokens, other cryptocurrencies, or make contributions to projects in anticipation of financial returns. Please do your own research.